Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. I just want to start tonight thanking those wonderful Arizona progressives who I spent Saturday night with, and also the folks in Nebraska who have fought so hard for what they believe in. This is what America is all about. People that want to get up and say what they believe and stand up for what they believe in. A lot on the pipeline coming tonight in the back half of the show and all this week here on the Ed Show. But let's go back to the guy who's on the hot seat. That would be Scott Walker, my old buddy. Walker is desperately trying to bury what I believe are very new revelations in this scandal, which resulted in 15 felony convictions and 3 misdemeanors for 6 of Walker's associates. Walker, of course, denied any involvement in any of the illegal activities. Now, the bottom line is this. When Walker was executive of the Milwaukee County, his staff set up a private Wi-Fi network to communicate about the 2010 gubernatorial campaign. County staffers used private laptops so their work wouldn't end up on county computers. But what about the time card? Walker's staff, funded by the taxpayers, worked on his gubernatorial campaign while they were on the county's dime. My friends, this is what the emails reveal. It reveals Walker's involvement. And you know what? It's illegal in the state of Wisconsin. So I think the push now and the question is on the prosecutor and the question now is on the Democrats. You know, these 14 senators that were brave enough to leave the state to stop this radical machine, now you got to be brave enough to start putting pressure on the prosecutor and asking questions. How in the world did Walker get away with this? New questions have been raised after 27,000 pages of emails, which seem to confirm Walker's involvement, became public on a document dump. Milwaukee District Attorney John Chisholm, the Democrat, which of course Walker always points out, the Democrat at the helm of the investigation, seems to, as I think, let Walker off the hook. How come? In the meantime, the governor of Wisconsin is making the rounds, calling it just a shut case.
It's absolutely not true. And if you look at the facts out there, this is old news. This is about a case that was closed last March. A Democratic district attorney in Milwaukee County spent multiple years looking at all this information, the 27,000 plus pages of documents that were just released this week. Have been looked by a team led by a Democrat in Milwaukee County. And last year in March, he announced the end of that case. Plain and simple, it's old news.
So there you have it. It's a Democratic prosecutor. It's old news. The case is closed. That's his bullet points. Even the folks across the street aren't ready to let Walker off the hook that easy.
If county workers were doing nothing wrong, why should they be using a private email account?
Well, but that's exactly to my point. You had a Democratic district attorney spend almost 3 years looking at every single one of those communications, interviewing people, talking to people, and closed the case last March.
Did you know there was a private email account?
No, again, it's one of those where I point out the district attorney has reviewed every single one of these issues.
But, sir, you're not answering my question.
No, because I'm not going to get into 27,000 different pieces of information. The bottom line is a Democrat who led the district attorney's office looked at all this, decided not to charge anything other than the individuals you mentioned who are people who had worked for the county in the past but don't work for me today. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Do you understand now why the conservatives love Scott Walker? He just keeps talking and talking and talking, and he's very evasive, and that's what they love. The bottom line is Walker is desperate. Walker was once a rising star with the Republican Party, with many people talking him up for a 2016 run. Now Walker is facing a tough re-election fight in November under a cloud of renewed scrutiny. So he's taking a page from the fellow embattled Republican governors, I would say. Walker is playing the card of a victim. He's a victim, claiming this is just all part of a Democratic smear campaign.
We have our political operatives at the DNC and the DGA that desperately want to switch the subject from the fact of things like us taking a $3.6 billion budget deficit and turning it into a nearly $1 billion surplus. They don't want to talk about the improvement in the economy. They don't want to talk about the successes we've had in our state. Instead, they desperately want to switch the subject on a subject that's already been resolved as of last March. It's one of those things where they just want to keep pushing this issue into the forefront because in the end, the folks running against us can't counter our positive message when it comes to the economy.
Oh, yes, we can. But you're good. You're good, Walker. You're on point with your bullet points. Driving it home. Walker wants to ignore the emails and pay attention to his record. Okay, let's do it. Governor Walker has pledged previously that he was going to create 250,000 jobs in his 4-year term. Walker's argued that policies like Anti-Union Act 10 would help him get that job done. Guess what? Let's focus on the record. Wisconsin has only added a net total of 53,809 jobs since he has taken office, well below the projection that he promised the taxpayers. Or let's go back to 3 years ago, when over 100,000 people gathered in the streets of Madison, Wisconsin at the Capitol to protest Walker's anti-union assault. We were there. 14 Senate Democrats fled the state to try to block this bill finally passed the state Senate without any Democrats present. So let's focus on the record. Madison, Wisconsin is the home of the very first Local 1 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, good old AFSCME. And according to the New York Times, since Act 10 was enacted in the state of Wisconsin, membership in Local 1 has gone from 1,000 workers down to 122 members. The legislation was designed to kill unions and to destroy the Democratic base in the state of Wisconsin. That's because Act 10 requires public employees to start contributing upwards of 6% of their pay towards pensions by law and pay at least 12% of their health care costs, which they had already negotiated for. Folks, that meant really a pay cut to the top of the multi-year pay freezes, okay? So the bottom line here is what? The law also created a burden by barring government officials from automatically deducting union dues directly from paychecks. They, of course, were saying the unions were robbing these workers. People are dropping out of unions because they can't afford to pay the dues because of the new laws. Walker and the Republicans simply passed legislation to starve people out of the union participation. This makes him, of course, the golden boy of the corporate world. But let's go back to the prosecutor, John Chisholm. I think if we can't get an explanation from Mr. Chisholm as to why he did not prosecute the governor of Wisconsin, let's get back to the fundamentals for just a moment. Mr. Chisholm, did your office read those 27,000 emails? You've got 125 employees underneath you. You've got 5 deputy assistant attorneys there in your office. Tell us you read them all, because the public seems to be reading them a heck of a lot different from your prosecuting team. Now, I know that there is another investigation going on, but do you have to get the guy twice? What's wrong with right now? How is it that Walker can be in these emails and not know that there is a secret email system going on which is against the law in Wisconsin? Mr. Chisholm, they keep telling us that you're a Democrat. Forget the politics. How about the law? An explanation, I think, is needed at this point. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: do you think Scott Walker has legally dodged this issue? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com, and we'll bring you the results later on in the show. Now, these laws that were passed in Wisconsin have had a real effect, and this is why Walker is the golden boy for the conservatives. Because if they can break down unions all across America, if they can create a template on how this can work, this could produce your next presidential candidate who might get some traction with those who just can't stand wage earners. Joining me tonight is Steve Greenhouse, labor correspondent of the New York Times, who wrote an excellent piece on what these laws have done to union participation in the state of Wisconsin. Steve, good to have you with us tonight. You published an article about Wisconsin's legacy for unions in the Times over the weekend. Excellent piece. What struck you the most covering the story?
Two things really struck me, Ed. One is the law that was passed to restrict or curb collective bargaining has really had fairly devastating effects on labor unions. And as you said, the first local ever, founded back in 1932 for, the nation's largest union of state, county, municipal employees. It's pretty astounding to learn that its membership has dropped to 122 from 1,000. I think the law really set up a minefield that makes it hard for unions to survive. That's one thing that struck me. The other thing that struck me is that there is such a polarized view within Wisconsin Scott Walker and many of his Republican supporters think that the act is great. They think that it has really helped towns and school districts balance budgets and given them more flexibility in dealing with unions. But on the other side, many unions and union leaders and workers I spoke to said, yes, this has saved communities money, but it's really done it on the backs of workers. And several workers I spoke to said that as a result of this law, their take-home pay has dropped 10–12% because they're contributing more for their pensions, they're contributing more for their health coverage, and not only that, many of the workers have faced pay freezes of 2 or 3 years, so their take-home pay has dropped 10–12%.
Yeah.
Plus, they face wage freezes, so I think their effective pay after inflation has dropped 15–17%. And that's one reason why the economy in Wisconsin is fairly weak.
It is very weak. In job creation, they're one of the worst in the country right now. So going after these workers has not really brought in a lot of new business to the state, which I think is really a vital point in all of this. What effect do you think that this is going to have on his reelection bid?
It's really hard to say, Ed. I think the state is a very polarized state. It has a strong progressive liberal left, and it has a strong conservative right. And I think a lot of taxpayers are happy that Act 10 has helped their towns balance their budget, has arguably helped avoid tax increases. But a lot of them have friends who are teachers, who are social workers, who are cops, and a lot of them are a lot of government employees are very unhappy, and they've made that known. They feel that Scott Walker has been unfair to them. They feel that they've moved significantly backwards on their pay. And one of the points I make in my piece, Ed, is that I think there's going to be a strong push from the unions, both from within Wisconsin and outside Wisconsin, to really try to unseat Scott Walker. But conservatives from around the country, whether it's the Koch brothers or Grover Norquist, are going to fight very hard to keep Scott Walker in the governor's mansion.
They are going to say this is the model. Steve Greenhouse, great work. Great to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time, sir. Now let's turn to Ruth Conniff of the Progressive Magazine in Madison, Wisconsin. Ruth, it is still focusing on the legal problems for Scott Walker. He says this investigation is over with. It's been over since March. He calls it old news. What's the response on the ground to the email scandal? Do folks on the ground in Wisconsin care about this?
Well, I mean, if you judge by the local newspapers, Wisconsin State Journal, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, this has been front page headline news every day since it broke. So, yes, this is getting a lot of traction. People are really interested. I think there's been a very strong message out of places like the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, which endorsed Walker in the recall election, saying, these emails clearly show that the governor was at the center of this, that he knew about it, that it is not credible for him to deny it. And furthermore, they don't like the fact that he's not answering questions about it.
Yeah.
And have really come out strongly in an editorial over the weekend saying, you've got to start answering these questions.
He simply would not answer the question yesterday on a secret email system. And now the question comes up, in light of the recent developments in the document dump of 27,000 emails, do you think Milwaukee's district attorney should have forced Walker to answer some of these questions? I mean, it looks like he's been let off the hook. How can other people to the number of double digits get charged with crimes, and Walker escapes? How did he escape this?
Well, the district attorney's batting 100% with those 15 felony convictions, right? And if he felt that he didn't have a slam dunk case against Walker, or if he felt that it looked too political, too close to an election, and he chickened out, which I think, Ed, you make that case, and I think it's a creditable case, then, he didn't take it to the hoop with Walker. We're seeing one little glimpse of all of these secret documents, which is really interesting for the public because all of this has been sealed until now. We're seeing just this glimpse of the emails that this one staffer, Kelly Reinfleisch, who pled guilty to a felony, had on her computer, and it shows clearly, I mean, I think almost overwhelmingly the response has been, this shows that Walker was directly involved. And I think that ethical problem is a separate question from the specific legal problem. But let me just say, there is an ongoing investigation. And the district attorney brought that to our, he brought that to our attorney general, a Republican, who declined after dragging his feet for months to prosecute it, as he properly should do. It's a 5-county investigation. It's ongoing. Walker may indeed be a target. So this is not over.
Okay. So that second investigation deals with the recall and the way Walker ran that campaign, correct?
We know that it deals with that because some of the groups like Club for Growth that are caught up in it have been subpoenaed, have been dragged out to talk about it because of this illegal coordination aspect, have said so in public. We don't know what else, though. That's one piece that we do know by their own admission that these folks are targets.
Walker, of course, wants everybody to focus on his record, which clearly is mixed. The story continues. Ruth Conniff, great to have you with us tonight. Appreciate your time. Up next, Chattanooga's Volkswagen workers continue the fight for the right to unionize. And still to come, the cost of the Keystone XL pipeline. My exclusive interview with the folks on the ground in Nebraska, the landowners whose home is within feet of the proposed pipeline route. Stick around. It's all coming up.